So, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to do a thing called grid enlarging first. Taken a print of Elvis here. I just got this off the web, printed it up. Nice sharp pencil, hard pencil, and we're going to use a very fine line. And you'll see that this is an A4 page, which is twice A3. A3 is twice the A4. So we're going to do 20mm squares, and I'm going to measure an edge. So I've got an icing from the edge of the paper, measuring 10mm there, then it's 20mm all the way along, and of course we're going to measure twice up and down. So I'll fast forward this at the moment. So measuring down the bottom, measure up the top, measure down the side. Now I'm taking from the edge, it was 5mm, 20mm there and 20mm there, all the way along. Then when we do a straight line, you make sure you hold the pencil at the end. You see it's held right at the end, so you can't put too much pressure on it. And also make sure the ruler is nicely lined up. So we between the two dots, and so we have this particular grid now that I've got going across Elvis's face, 1 to 9 there, and ABC down. There you go. So I've worked out the dimension. I'm going to do this 30mm square, so it's 1.5 times as big. Measure along the side, 30mm. Make sure that we've got a nice measurement all the way across. Now I can't emphasize how important it is to do that leveling. Now I'll slow it down. Now when slow it down, and you can see that I'm actually taking my time and I'm measuring very gently from line to line. This is a sort of pace that I do. Now the reason why is I want a faint line. I don't want to press hard. So you can see I'm holding right at the edge of the pencil. And it means that I've got the ruler nice and straight. You see I've spread my fingers across the ruler. Nice and straight, push down hard, and just rest the line, the pencil lead, rest that against the ruler and just pull it across. Nice and neat, nice and gently. So you can see I also make sure that I have a lot of paper underneath the ruler so the paper doesn't move as well. So the ruler, pressing down on the ruler makes the paper hold tight as well. That's why I turned the paper over. We'll do the side. Now it's sped up 6 times again, so this is 6 times the speed. So I'm taking my time, ruling across. As you can see, you can probably just make out the lines now. They're very faint, of course, because I want the paint to cover it. Turn the paper around so there's always a lot of paper under a ruler. And you'll have these nice straight edges. Number them across, A, B, C. Now I've across and then 1, 2, 3, 4 down. So, turning it upside down. Now the key is to understand that we look at each grid and draw on the lines for each grid. And this takes some time, and the reason why we do it in pencil first is just to mark out, again like a negative shape, but in this case the grid allows me to see whether it's halfway along the square or a third of the way along the square where the line of the face meets. This is a very important skill because it gives you the opportunity to draw inside each grid to get the ratios right. Is it a third? Is it a quarter? Is it a half? So you can see I'm working through this, going from grid to grid, every so often checking to make sure I'm on the right grid square. Very faintly, it gives me the opportunity to pencil in things like the mouth here, the nose, to make sure that I've got all of the elements drawn in as a little reference. Doesn't matter if I make too much of a mistake, but it's really important to try and get the guide happening. So it means that you've got the opportunity to line things up. So working along, checking grid to grid, making sure that I've got each section of the grid, lining up the face against the intersection. Sometimes it works really sweet where you have the tip of the nose at the corner where 4 lines meet, and making sure we pencil everything in so we've got a rough outline of where things are. Now, grid enlarging has been done for thousands of years. The ancient Romans used this grid format to extend their drawings onto the frescoes, mosaics. There's the drawings there. You can hardly make it out in the video, but you can see there that the drawing is there. My plates, my paints. I'm going to use a daub of each colour now. I'm not going to bother making the primary colours. I've got, in the kit I've provided you, we've got red, we've got orange, we've got yellow. So I'm putting the warm colours in one plate and the cool colours on the other. So black and the cool, white and the warm. Put the paint kit away, get your brushes out. We're going to use all 4 brushes here. And the first step is we're going to map out the dark shadows using a cool colour. So I've got black and I've got blue and I've got purple that I've mixed there. Lots of water. So this is what's called underpainting. It's very important to understand that with painting, the light travels through the paint, hits the surface of the paper and then reflected out, and it's the reflection of the light that we're seeing. So if you build underpainting, and here I'm using the pointy sort of brush to get the details of the eyes, is I'm just mapping out shadows using the cool colour. The shadows are pretty obvious to see on the black and white photo. And so here I am using the grid, but using my brush, the pencil marks that I've already done there, and mapping out the shadows first. The idea, of course, is to get the shadows as a piece of underpainting. Now I'll slow things down. I want to make sure you see the real time every so often that I'm taking my time and I am checking, still using the grid to help me map out cool colours for the shadows. You can see there's a bit of water in there. It's quite loose and liquid because I can use the edge of the brush. I can get the shadows happening. And the brush mark, it's really important to understand that your brush mark isn't a pencil. Your brush mark is there to both do negative and positive shapes. And often it's the intersection of one sharp shadow with the bright light area. That's what gives us the shape of the head. So you can see I'm working into the cheekbones there now, mapping out a broad colour. It doesn't matter that it's streaky. This is underpainting. And in painting, there's this concept of fat over lean, where you have very watery paint first for your underpainting. Once you've mapped out both your highlights and your darkness and lightness there, you can then work back over. As you'll see further on in this video, you can work back over your painting to provide fat, that is less water, less diluted paint over the top. So I'll speed this up again. So speeding up again, 600%. You can see that I'm mapping out the shadows. It's pretty obvious to see the shadows, and little bits to choosing paint, to choosing the brush to determine what it is that you're looking at. And building up the shadows. Notice I'm using the thin brush, a thin pointy brush, to work out some masked areas there, and I'm also using the big fat wedge brush because I can use the edge and I can use the flat to map out and mass areas. We call it massing. See, I'm using the pointy brush like a pencil almost to try and get those shapes happening first. It doesn't matter what it looks like at the moment because what we're doing is mapping out the shadow area, and then I'll be mapping out the warm areas, that is the areas I want to stand out. Cool colours go back, warm colours come out at you, which is what we're trying to do. So I'll speed it up even more. Notice, even this is 3 times as fast. I'm taking my time. I'm making sure that I map out those dark areas using the grid, using the brush. It's important to make sure you look at the various darknesses though. You see how the hair's quite dark and then there's lighter things for the cool. Now it's time, I'm off washing the brush, it's now time for warm colours. This is where people get quite upset because it looks a bit odd when you start massing out your warm colours. You want to remember that reds and yellows stand out, so I'm going to use my red and my yellow there, add a bit of orange and then maybe a little bit more yellow, but first of all add a bit more yellow, weather it down, and on the forehead you can see on the black and white it's quite shiny in the forehead, so I want that to stand out. Now orange and blue of course are complementary, so one of the reasons why I'm using orange and blue is together they stand out a bit. It's a bit of a style. And of course, part of this whole exercise is for us to practice what we call warm and cool colours, right? So things that stand out, things that are bright, I want to have as warm colours. And remember, this is watery paint that I'm using to map and mass out the warm areas, chin, things that stand out. You can add a bit more yellow, add a bit more red to make it stand out even more. You can see. Get my other brushes out. And now what I'm doing is adding some more cool because I've got that area there. I want to try and fill up the shapes with the mix of the warm and the cool. You've got to be careful not to make your paint muddy here. So where it's highlight, where it's light on the black and white, I'm adding warm colours. Where it's greyish or dark on the black and white, I'm adding cool colours, warm to cool. That's why we use the black and white picture to paint. So it's all invented. We're making this up as we go along, but what's really important here is for you guys to get the hang of using underpainting, using warm and cool colours to build up your understanding of shapes, your understanding of darkness and lightness. So, I've got 4 brushes in my hand now. And each brush does a different thing, of course. The pointy brush gives me very thin lines. There's 3 wedged brushes, 1 tiny wedge brush and 2 other ones, 1 bigger one, helps me mass out an area. And of course the beauty of paint is if you make a mistake you can always go over it again. It's a bit messy there at the moment, but trust me, it will come out. So, fast forwarding through as we're massing this. Working on the nose and the shadow of the nose there is really important. It's gotten a bit muddy, but that's okay. I'm going to add some green into here now because it's less cool. Add a bit of white to it. It gives me shadows, but it's not as dark as the blue, so it's a good one to use for the very light grey that's there on the black and white rather than the darker blacks. That's where the green comes in. Now, at this stage, most people will look at the paint and go, that's a dog's breakfast. You know, what are you, crazy? The important thing is to understand that what we're doing here is mapping out underpainting. It's under the painting. So we're mapping out strong colours that we can then use our white and another lighter mix over the top, as you can see now. By adding white to these things, we're actually blending over it, and then we can add colour over the top. And you can see that the paint is dried now underneath, so I can use white, I can use highlights to mass out more darkness and lightness, but in this case coolness and warmness. Now this is a video that's gone just over 15 minutes, and it took me an hour by this stage to get to this point. So I'll take it back down to the normal pace just to show you what happens now. I'm getting white, and I'm going to start adding white to the white areas, so teeth, the eyeballs, etc. Nice clear white, and you can see the pace at which I'm working. So sometimes I like slowing this down so you guys can see that I'm not, this is not fast forward Benny Hill style painting. This is how slow I'm painting. But of course you don't need to watch me do this at this pace for 2 hours. That would be very, very boring. I'm mixing some cool colours there with my thin brush to start map out some more shadows under the eyes. So the thin brush is the important one here because it's mapping out finer detail. Now speeding up again. So you can imagine how slow I'm doing this, trying to get those details in. I'm continually referring back to the grid line. I'm using the blue though, the cool colours, as an analogue for the black and greys, and I'm using the warm colours as an analogue for the whites and the light colours. Again, you can see my head looking back over and over towards the details, cool colours for shadows and for darkness. I really work on this nose here, and I come to the decision I've made a mistake with the nose. It's too far up, so time to change some things. Now I'm starting to add white over the top. The paint's dry underneath, or a little bit malleable, but mostly dry. And what I'm now doing is adding white just across the top. You can see I'm still working on that nose. I make a change on that nose a bit later, but I'm using white across the top of everything. So the underpainting is starting to finish. Put the white there to start to see what happens. Now onto the lips, warm colours, and of course lips are red anyway, so we might as well have a crack at doing that. They're not red really, they're pink. Bit of red on the cheekbone and a bit of white. Now this is a blending experience that you guys need to learn how to do, where we add a bit of paint. You'll see I add a bit of red there on the cheek, and I've got a paintbrush with white on it there, and I add over and blend that in. You can see how I'm starting to build that over. Add over and blend it in. So notice now that the underpainting isn't nearly as obvious, and of course by the time we finish the piece you won't know why it glistens or why it's a bit shiny, because that underpainting helps beef up the colours. As you can see, it's working here now. I've got little brush strokes that I use. As you can see. Moving on. I'm sick of that nose. I wasn't happy with it. So this is the beauty of painting. You can just paint white over it and then redefine it. So I'm looking back at the thing and I'm rebuilding that nose up. A little bit of blue, a bit of white. That blue though is a blacky blue that I've got some purple in there too, so I've got a nice cool colour to get that shadow happening. And you can see that the white and the nose starts to build up. You add a bit of blue and a bit of white. Now I'm starting to do the eyes, concentrating on the eyebrows. So I'm now painting over the underpainting with detail. Thin brush, looking closely, making some decisions, adding white over, blending through. You can start to see how that paint's working. Add some more shadows over the top because I wasn't happy with that shadow there. Brushes are adding that over. Then of course I can use my white while that's still drying a little bit. Then I can work back over it with my white too. So the key too is very important to make sure that the paint is at certain levels of dryness. So that dried a bit now, so I can go over it with the white without blending it too much. I want it blend a bit, but not that much. It's a matter of practicing and getting used to the paint's consistency at various stages of drying. Water's filthy, clean water now. You've got to do that. Clean the brushes back in. Now I'm starting to map out some more shadows here. And my painting teacher at art school told me once the difference between a picture and a painting is that you spend as much time on the bottom left-hand corner of the painting as you do on an eyeball. So you'll find at the end of the painting that I've actually, remember I talked about capital letters and full stops, the sentence structure of a picture where you frame it, the same with the painting. And so you spend time on that. So working over, and I'd like you to think about painting as layers. It's a really important concept that, especially if you're painting or using chalk or coloured pencil, etc., it's all about layers where you have your underpainting. Now, you remember what the underpainting was like? Everybody said, you know, you would have looked at that and said that's disgusting. But now the underpainting is showing through the top layers and it gives it a depth that you otherwise wouldn't have. That's a very important thing to understand in paint. Sorry, my big head's in the way, but you can see I'm leaning over, making sure that I'm spending time looking at the detail. I'd like to point out to you, whoop, shoulder's in the way completely there, sorry. I want to point out to you how many times my head actually looks at the picture. Okay, so I've got my blue underpainting, now I want to do the hair. Of course, the blue gives me coolness. Now I've got a blacky blue that I'm putting over that there. Also, looking at the ear, getting the shapes, and deciding on a palette. So I've got this blacky blue that I'm using, and I've got this grey purpley blue that I'm using as well. So I've got a blacky blue and a purpley blue that I'm using. That's how the ear forms, as you can see. Just making sure we get that. Now, of course, with any sort of face, the jawline's really important in a face. Getting the edges right. And so's the lips, so's the cheeks. Elvis, of course, has got magnificent cheekbones, which is why the girls loved him. So, what I'm now going to do is show you how to do the hair. There's highlights all through his hair there, and instead of trying to put the highlights over black, which you'll never do, put the highlights in first, work that through, and of course then with a black, I can use lines. With my thin brush, I can follow the angle, follow the texture of the hair that's in the picture, as you can see, and leaving gaps, but lo and behold, it looks like the hair's got highlights. Because remember, in pictures, in painting and in drawing, the gap is often more important then what you draw is what you don't draw, the negative shape. And in this case, you can see the hair. By having the white first, you get that shine. By having the blue underneath, though, you get that coolness. Then the white gives you the shine, and there you got him, the uber greaser. So, back into the neck. It's all about making sure you get attention to detail across the entire gamut of the paint. Using the negative shape. Using a blending brush. So here's my white that I'm blending down so I can get those shapes together. And did you notice how my brush strokes are going the contour, just like the contour drawings, just the tone contour that we talked about when we did pictures. Your paintbrush made a mess. Now I want to do the negative shape here. My shoulder's in the way, but it's very important to use cool palette for the background. Of course, the yellowy sort of green in his face will mix with the purple and give you a bit of a sharpness. But if I just have straight purple, it'll be way too dead. So that's where we add some darkness. I'll get his eyebrow in there so I don't make too much of a mistake. Get those eyebrows happening. Add some white to that, and then we can start blending the purple in. Sorry about my shoulder, it's in the way, but that's that side of the paint. Now, one thing I haven't done, which I did with the colour wheel, is turn things over. The reason why I haven't turned it upside down is I want the whole thing to be composition. So I'm really keen to get the look happening. So, the edge there, how important is the edge of that face? Also, notice I'm using the wedge brush to do the lines in his shirt. I like the lines in the shirt. I think they're that's an important thing because it actually will help me with the contour of his body. So I decided I'd do some of that. And how important is it to get that edge right? Look how that chin comes out now because I got that edge sitting there. But without the underpainting, I wouldn't have had the coolness. So, off to wash the brushes, no doubt. You can see that I'm going to use green and a dark sort of olivey green first to get that edge there happening. Again, this is just like the underpainting before. I'm putting the paint in, then I'm going to work over that with the white to get that edge happening. And then I can start using more and more green. So I really like the idea of having whatever colours are in the face, you do in the background. So there's light greens and there's bright greens and there's whites, etc. The green in the background will actually help that come out. Mapping out the collars, paying attention to detail. Made a mistake here. I thought I could do this with the pointy brush. It didn't work. That's all right. We see I made a muck up then. But again, paint's fantastic. It's really actually very forgiving because I'm going to go over that later with white and fix it. Yeah, we get that brush in there. More and more green, so I become more and more lime green as we go out. And there's that all-important frame. That all-important frame. The line's there for me anyway because of the grid that I drew. So use it. And make sure, please, when you do a picture that you finish it off because it makes such a difference. Add some white. Get some shape in there. Don't want one great lumpy green. Get some highlights to help bring out the highlights in his face. Highlights in the hair. Work the brush down. Get some texture happening. The beauty of brush strokes, you get texture, a bit of yellow now. Get some yellow in there. Get some shape happening in that background. See how important it is to spend as much time on the background and getting those shapes and things happening as on the face. So, do the other background now, the other side. Sorry about my shoulder. Same thing, very wet to start off with, then working over it. A bluey purple. You can see that's working. I'll slow it down so you can see the space. Sorry about my shoulder there. You can see how I've got the brushes between my fingers, so I know where the brushes are, because you want to work from brush to brush. Each brush has a colour on it, and I think it's important sometimes to show you the pace I'm working at. So whilst it, sorry about my shoulder, but whilst you can see it looks great when it's quick, this is the sort of time consuming. So the picture itself took 2 hours to do from the start, from drawing the grid. I could probably do more on it, but I want to try and keep things within 2 hours for you. You can see that I'm using the brush edge to try and redefine that face. Get in there, make sure there's a little, I put a bit of yellow in the, white, just because it helps the bit of yellow that's on the other side. Spend some time to get right up against that, because of course he had dimples, so that face had to have a little bit of a bump in it, the edge. I'll speed it up again. Off, washing the brushes. I'm going to use the white now and get down to this bottom bit. Lots of white, wet white again, underpainting with the white. Put that in so I can build that up. Nice edge, and make sure that gets to that point. Add some colour into that. Cool colour. See, I mucked up that collar, so I just went over it. Cool colours. Bring that back up. Using the edge of my thing, I made this line colour there, which is a purpley black, and you can see that I'm just using the edge. And I'm looking closely at the grid to make sure that I've got the lines the way it is on the picture. You can't quite make it out there, but I just thought the lines are pretty important to put in there. He's got a checkered shirt on, so use a checkered shirt. It's that 50s sort of style anyway, which attracted me to the picture in the first place, and I want to reuse that. And that's the whole point about being an artist, is making a decision about design, making a decision to implement that because it appeals to you. You know, you're allowed to do this. If you like it, chances are somebody else in the world is going to like it too. Unless you're an old fat man like me, in which case they can all just put up with it. So there's the lines. I'm not making it, I'm just doing it in little bits. It's a sort of a painterly thing there. Make sure that's finished. And of course, the real key is I've got a little bit of white, get that highlight happening. Really important to get those eyes. And then the final, making sure that the eye shapes are there. You can see I'm adding that over painting, then getting that detail happening. Making sure you look at the picture all the time. And a really important thing, make sure your brush is wiped, because the last bit is to do these little highlights. A little bit of white. I ran out of white, just a tiny bit of white. The tip of my very pointy brush, and a little bit of highlight on the eye there, and it makes it look like he's alive. A little bit on the lip, and just make sure that there's nice whiteness in the teeth, and make sure that the eyes look like they're alive. So, finished. Well, maybe not really finished, but for all intents and purposes, that's all I want to do. You can sort of see the underpainting underneath the layers of paint. The eyes need a bit more work, but hey, for the 2 hours, that'll do me for now. That's the picture. You can see the underpainting. You can do this, guys. Very important to clean up. You can see the underpainting there. And when I show you the actual thing, you'll see what I'm talking about. I'm also showing you Clean the brushes, please, once you're finished, nice and clean. Put the paints away. You can see that. Put the brushes away. Wash the plates so mum and dad don't have to deal with your mess. Dry them and put them away. And you should be happy. Paints away. See how they're nicely stacked? Ready to go. Nicely ready, stacked away, ready to go next time. Not put everywhere. Plates are clean. And there he is. There's the thing. Grid enlarged. You can do this.